All right, check this out. So GOP lawmaker rips DeSantis for Doge comments. What? What was DeSantis talking about with Doge? I don't know, but let's find out.
To codify Doge's cuts. For more, let's bring in GOP Nebraska Congressman Mike Flood. Congressman, thanks for joining us this afternoon. You know, when Elon Musk promises that his Doge is going to permeate government as he leaves Washington, what kind of a form do you think that's going to take?
Well, look at what he's done at Doge. He's done a remarkable job of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. And the rescissions package, I think the first tranche of that, which is coming over this week, is evidence that what he's done is historic. You know, in 30 years, we haven't had this kind of a conversation about waste, fraud, and abuse and federal spending and where do your dollars go. Just look at what he did with USAID. He rooted out all that woke stuff that was going overseas, things that Americans don't want to support. And so I think this is the beginning, and the whole conversation in Congress is changed because of it.
The Florida governor had some criticism for the big, beautiful bill and the package that you guys passed a short while ago. He wrote, quote, he, Elon Musk, became public enemy number one of legacy media around the world. To see Republicans Congress cast aside any meaningful spending reductions and, in fact, fully fund things like USAID is demoralizing and represents a betrayal of the voters who elected them. So these cuts that are now coming from the White House, why did they miss getting put in the first bill?
Well, you got to remember, reconciliation, the process that has the big, beautiful bill, is only for mandatory spending. Much of what DOGE has looked at is the discretionary spending. So you got to get your facts straight when you're making comments like that, because this is far more complicated than just doing it in reconciliation. It takes a focus on the discretionary spending, which we will start with this week.
Well, discretionary spending isn't part of that, is part of the big, beautiful bill, isn't it? Or you have not, Congress hasn't passed the discretionary portion? Because mandatory spending is on autopilot.
Yeah, the only thing that reconciliation under the Congressional Budget Act of 1974 can do is touch mandatory spending. Now, a lot of times, you talk about some of the protections we had for Medicaid, but we also found a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. That's all in a mandatory spending package. The discretionary side will deal with these rescissions, which should start this week.
So DOGE promised at first a couple trillion, ended up as $1 trillion, and then said it saved about $170 billion. Are you disappointed that they failed to deliver anywhere near what they had promised?
Well, that's 3 months. And as I understand it, DOGE continues on. You know, in 3 months to find $170 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse, that's like 1/4 of all of the spending we do for our U.S. military. That's a pretty sizable amount of money. There's more to be done. But hey, we have to remember, Congress has the power of the purse. This burden shouldn't be just on the executive branch. It's our job in Congress to find more, to do more. And I know those conversations will continue throughout the entire 119th Congress, which ends at the end of next year. So there's a lot of work still to be done.
The Senate has the big, beautiful bill right now. What do you expect that they will do with that? Do you expect that there will be substantial changes and that you're going to have to open up that Pandora's box if it gets kicked back to the House? Or do you think it'll be pretty consistent with what you've passed over on the House side?
Well, I want them just to rubber stamp it and pass it right back. That's how this should be.
I don't think so, but
I think you're absolutely right. I fear that it's going to come over and it's going to be difficult to find 218 votes, because we had quite a balance just to get to where we are. And we have a smaller margin with over 200 members than they do in the Senate. So if they're wanting to move this forward and get this done before our August recess, the fewer the changes, the better.
What are the risks of those who are deficit hawks, in particular on the House side here? Because you've got Moody's downgrading the U.S. debt just a week or two ago. The U.S. debt's been downgraded by other ratings agencies. We are on a trajectory that is just absolutely unsustainable, according to every group that has looked at where our spending and our revenues are. Right now, this bill would add money to the national debt compared to just doing nothing. So where are you going to find those extra savings to make it fiscally responsible?
Well, let's be clear. The mandatory spending reconciliation bill does cut north of $1 trillion, and that's a very good thing. That's the first time that's happened in a generation. Like I said, we've got our budget coming up, which will be taken up sometime after the August recess. The government's fiscal year starts October 1st. And ultimately, the DOGE effort will continue working, and we'll keep identifying different places we can cut. And we'll start this week with the first rescission package, which codifies the changes that Elon Musk was able to identify and root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Listen, we didn't get into this overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. And everything we do has to also be focused on growing the economy. And a lot of the projections rely on CBO numbers that I don't agree with. The same type of cuts were made back in 2017, and we saw explosive growth in this country. Elon said it himself last week. Growing GDP is the best way, in addition to cuts in spending, to get out of the hole that we're in. And that's what this does.
You've looked at some of the mandatory spending when it comes to Medicaid. Do you have to look at other mandatory programs like Social Security, like Medicare?
Well, the reconciliation process specifically prohibits us from touching Social Security. So that was off the table when we started. That was set in law back in 1974. Do we have to look at other mandatory spending? Yes. And look at what, we're paring back a lot of the tax credit giveaways that the Biden administration was handing out like candy. I mean, that stuff is getting grabbed back, and it's going to save us a ton of money. And I don't think Americans will even be able to understand what kind of a generational shift this is until we get it passed and you start seeing what happens. That's why we're so focused on getting this done as soon as possible, so that everybody in America can understand this as we get ready for elections next year.
There you go.